In this video, we're going to be installing an OptLaser's 15-watt laser adapter onto the Inventables X-Carve Pro. This is an add-on device from OptLasers. They're a European company, and they provide add-on laser engravers for nearly any CNC that's on the market. This is a laser head, and as you would expect from this company, this quality is just exceptional. They really do a good job of building these devices. They're very polished, tolerances are very good, and they're just real high quality equipment. There's really basically 4 parts to adding this on, and by the way, this device can be added to the standard X-Carve, actually easier than the X-Carve Pro, or it can be added to the X-Carve Pro, and that's what we're doing in this video. But there's really just 4 components: the laser head that we just opened, this CNC adapter, which is really the brains of the outfit that convert the signal from the CNC machine to the laser head, and then 2 cables. This is a 5-conductor cable that runs between that CNC adapter and the actual laser head, and then a 2-conductor cable that runs between the CNC controller and the CNC adapter. These are some safety goggles that have to be worn anytime the laser is operating. This is a 24-volt power supply, just a standard barrel plug that plugs into the CNC adapter. I'm going to have to remove one end of this 5-conductor wire in order to feed it through the drag chain. So here I'm just checking the continuity so I can put it back the way it was after I get it run through those drag chains. If you assembled your X-Carve yourself, then you're familiar with running wires through the drag chains. The blue hose that you can see is a air assist that I had installed because I had a 6-watt laser on this previous to this 15-watt. But basically you're running the wire on the X-Carve Pro. It starts in the rear left corner, runs through the Y drag chain, makes the corner, runs through the X drag chain, and then into the main control head. The blue hose that you can see running through the drag chain, as I said, is for the air assist. The 15-watt unit has a built-in air assist connection at the very bottom. It runs up through a hole in the back of the laser head, and then you can connect it to your air compressor, or you can get a separate little pump that'll pump enough air to just provide some airflow through the nozzle. I made this magnetic bracket for my CNC to hold the 15-watt laser head. Sometimes I can get a little careless and lower the unit too far or run it into the side of the machine, so I wanted it to be able to break away if that happened. What I'm showing here is the actual mount that OptLasers provides with this device, and it's super easy to install. It can go on the right side or the left side of the spindle, and either side has 3 bolts, and they just hold a dust cover on. You remove those 3 bolts, you put in 3 standoffs, and then the mount attaches to those standoffs. This same mounting bracket can be used for the 6-watt unit. It can be used for the 15-watt and also the docking station for the 6-watt unit. So it's kind of a universal mount for all of their devices. So here's kind of the wiring for this system in a nutshell. The 5-conductor port here on the left, that 5-conductor wire is the one that runs through the drag chains and to the actual laser head at the spindle. The 2-conductor wire on the right side of this adapter is the brown and the white wire that run into the control box. The white wire being the ground, the brown wire is the one that accepts the PWM signal from the CNC controller. And then the top wire is just the barrel plug for the 24-volt power supply. So here we're going to get into the wiring, and to do this you have to do it inside of the control box for the X-Carve Pro. After the 5-conductor wire is connected here over to the spindle, the laser head, then the only other connection is the 2-conductor wire that is connected to the 2-pin and the 4-pin on the other side of this adapter. And that's this here. So the white is the ground. The brown connects to the PWM output of the CNC controller. The X-Carve Pro is a little different in that the PWM connection is inside the machine. I do need to mention that if you decide to install this add-on, and make this alteration inside your control box, you'll be doing it at your own risk. We're really only altering one wire inside the controller box, and it's not a power wire. But if you're not comfortable with this, I suggest that you not do it. I've had mine in place for several months, and I've had no issues at all. And the process is easily reversible. And even though we're not handling any power wires inside the control box, they are present. So please be sure to unplug the main power cord before opening up the case. The PWM comes from this little board right here, and it turns out it's this yellow and white wire. This is a spindle controller, so the PWM gives a signal to this spindle controller. This thing talks through this wire to the actual spindle and sets its speed and adjusts it based on the Gerbil software and your settings that you use in whatever software you're using. This yellow wire, the PWM signal from the CNC controller, needs to connect to this brown wire when you're using the laser, and it needs to connect to this spindle controller on this AI1 port when you're using the CNC router. This can be done using this on-off-on switch. It's got 3 positions, 3 poles. The center is a common pole. You flip it this way, there's continuity here. You put it in the middle, there's no continuity between any of them. You flip it this way, these two are connected. You can mount this switch wherever you want. You could put a hole in the back of the controller and mount the switch there if your control box is near where you control your CNC and your laser. I ran mine through an extended wire out and put it near my keyboard or my mouse, and so I can control it from there. I have it mounted in a little box, and it says spindle and laser, and so flip it that way. The PWM connects to the spindle. This way the PWM goes to the laser controller. I'm gonna use these 3 little extension wires. I'm gonna use one's black, the other 2 are gray, or one has a black line on it. I'm gonna use it as the common one, so it's gonna be the PWM from the board. The other 2, one is gonna be the wire to the laser adapter. The other one is going to go to this AI1, which is spindle controller for the CNC. So we said the PWM signal is going to go to this center post on the plug. So take that out of that AI1 position. We tie these 2 together. So now the PWM from the control board goes to the center switch of this 3-pole switch, and we can send it wherever we want. So first place is to its original position, this AI1 port on the spindle controller. These little ferrule connectors are nice, and that's what's used underneath these. Slide them, they slide right into that little tube, and then you just crush them flat with I'm sure there's a specific tool for this, but I've always just used these big pliers. So that gives you that connection. And we can put that back where we took the PWM. Okay. So that's where the PWM signal originally went, AI1. It now goes to this switch. So if we flip this switch like this, the connections are as they were. We're going to add this pole. So when we switch it this way, the PWM signal goes to the laser controller. Okay, that's how that looks. And then fortunately there's an unused ground port on this spindle controller that I checked, and it does have continuity to the chassis and the ground right here. So we can use it to ground. And that's it. You can button all this up, zip tie it together. Oh, here's the other connector for the laser controller to the other connector on the switch. And that's it. Now we're switching the PWM from the spindle controller this way to the laser controller. And that's it. You can button all these up, zip tie them, mount this switch wherever you want, or extend these wires and put the switch somewhere more handy. Here's a closer look at those connectors on the spindle controller. The AI1 port down here, and then that ground port on the top. And just on a side note, an advantage to this that I find useful that I missed from my regular X-Carve was being able to just turn the spindle off even when you're doing CNC work. Sometimes it's nice to run like an air cut, as they call it, where you're just cutting over your work, or you're just moving the spindle over your work to see where it's going to cut. It's nice to be able to turn the spindle off and just let the gantry move the router head around. It's also nice for pausing. You can hit the pause button and stop the gantry, shut the spindle off, and come back in an hour or a day or two or whatever and finish that job. So it's kind of a unintended advantage there of adding this switch to switch between the spindle and the laser. So before we can actually use the laser head with the X-Carve Pro, we need to have some software installed. And what I've chosen is Lightburn, and it is really is the standard for laser machines. It's really well supported software. There's lots of tutorials online. YouTube is full of tutorial videos. This is paid software that you have to purchase. I believe there's a 30-day trial version of it, and I'll put a link in the description for that download. Once the software is installed, the first thing that is going to pop up is a window to add a new device. And then I usually use Create Manually. The X-Carve Pro is a Gerbil device, so highlight that. Next. It's connected by USB, and then you can just give it a name. The next setting is the size of the work area. The X-Carve Pro, in my case, is 48 by 48, which is 1219 millimeters. And then hit next. I usually turn off auto home, and I make the front left my starting point. Once that's all in, you can select finish. Now there's a couple, just 3 or 4 settings here that we need to do. This number right here, this S number, that needs to match the $1.30 number that we put into Gerbil. So in this case, it's 1000, which is the maximum power to the laser head. Also going to turn on the Z-axis, relative Z moves, fast white space scan set at 8000, and then enable the laser fire button. After that, there's just one more setting that needs to be done under File Settings, and that's to change from millimeters per second to millimeters per minute, and then save that. In order for Lightburn to communicate with the CNC controller, it needs to know what COM port the CNC controller is using on the computer. And an easy way to find that out is if you hit this drop-down box here, with your CNC controller off, you can see what COM ports the computer is currently recognizing. And then if you turn your controller on, give it a second to recognize, you can see which one was added. And then if you turn the controller off, then that one will go away. Then you know which one it is that the X-Carve Pro is using. You can also do this within Windows in the device manager under ports in the same manner. Just turn it on, look for the new COM port to show up, and then shut it off and look for it to go away. Up here under console, you see this is all the communication that Lightburn is having with the Gerbil controller. If you select, in my case, I'll select X-Carve Pro and it automatically switched to COM4, which is what we found out earlier. And you can see when it does that, it connected here, gives you the Gerbil version. So now we know that Lightburn is, in fact, talking to the X-Carve Pro. So the X-Carve Pro does use the PWM signal to control the spindle. In this case, when we're using the laser, we need to turn on and off something called laser mode in Gerbil. What laser mode does is it prevents the signal from being sent anytime the gantry is not moving. One nice thing about Lightburn is it has these macros here. So what I usually do, and you can do this any way you want, I use 3 of them. So this macro 2, there's 6 total, 0 through 5. This macro 2, I name it to see settings, and then I give it a $sign as the command. So anytime you save it, you see the name changes here. Anytime I click on this, it's going to send $sign, and the results will show in this console window. So using these macros, we're going to change just 2 settings, and then we'll set a macro to switch it back to use the spindle. $32 is going to turn on and off laser mode, and $30 is going to match that S value that we put in the settings earlier. So if we go to device settings, you see this S value right here. We set it to 1,000. So that needs to match the $30 setting in Gerbil whenever we're using the laser. Right click on macro 0. I name that use laser. So we'll set $30 equals 1,000, and we'll set $32 equals 1, which is laser mode on. So when we save this, anytime we send this macro, the first one, use laser, it's going to change those 2 settings. So 32 right now is at 0, and 30 is at 24,000. So if we send this, and now look at the settings, we see that 32 is now set to 1, which is laser mode, and 30 is now set to 1,000, which matches that S value. So what we need to do is set a macro to go back for spindle use. Use spindle, and we'll set $30 back to 24,000, which was the setting that was in Gerbil by default with the X-Carve Pro. And then we'll set $32 back to 0. Look at the current settings. We have the last thing we sent was use laser. We have 32 at 1, 30 at 1,000. We click the use spindle macro. Now look at the settings again. And 31 is at 0. Or 32, I'm sorry. 32 is at 0. 30 is back to 24,000. So those are really handy, and you have to remember when you fire up Lightburn to use the laser, you have to remember to just run this macro one time to use the laser to get laser mode on, set that S value number for $30. And then you also have to remember before you close it, click use spindle, and I always just kind of look and make sure that it worked, make sure that it changed the numbers. And then you can close Lightburn, but then those numbers are set back for spindle use. If you forget to click use spindle before you close Lightburn, the next time you use your CNC with the spindle, it's going to act funny because the spindle is going to want to stop every time the gantry. So once you've got the control box all buttoned up and the wires run, back to running this job, I'll flip the switch to laser, arm the CNC controller by turning the key, push the red arm button. When you push that button, you'll see that the fan starts on the laser head, and then you can go ahead and start the job within Lightburn. Here's an example of doing some engraving on a card scraper of tempered hardened steel, and you can see it does a pretty nice job. So that's it for installing this laser on the X-Carve Pro. It's really a pretty simple installation. Even the connections inside the control box are fairly simple. They're effectively just one wire that you're switching. I'm going to put a link down in the description for some of the items referenced in this video, and also an affiliate link if you're interested in making a purchase of this or the 6-watt device or any of the devices from OptiLasers. They're really a quality company and a good product. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.